series, topic number 2 says certain African teams had the better talent and better footballing discipline. Is it an issue of mentality, or is that the wrong answer? This comes with several links. I mean, share the first one. The first one is going to take us to X. And a tweet from Biggest Mac that says Colonial mentality affects African football the same way it affects other areas of the continent's development. I'm glad the usual suspects are beginning to understand this. So let's watch the video.
Africans, if you like, keep victim. Keep crying for Africans will never ever move forward until we choose to address the real elephant in the room. I've been screaming this since the start of the tournament. We have a mentality issue. Losers' mentalities in the blood of many of these are African countries. Loser mentality. We have inferiority complex. They are better than these European teams, but they do not believe that they are better. I feel no sympathy for Senegal today. I see, if I come here and lie to you like, oh, I feel bad for Senegal. I do not. Okay. I don't. You are the African champions.
Okay, enough. You see the thing about Africans, many Africans, and I say this all the time. Before they understand anything, they must suffer personal loss, personal tragedy, personal predicament before they understand what you are trying to teach them. It's not wrong. Inferiority complex is not wrong. It affects a lot of Africans. Well, the point here is, even the person who is saying this, he only understands this now because it involves football, which is there to him. How could you not feel inferior when is white? Your entertainment is white. Your politics is white. Your savior is white. Every damn thing you devote your time. Even this person who is talking here, is round the clock all year long. What does he do? He's an expert on European football. So is every other person who is in that field, this same space with him, who are Africans. That's what they're only talking about African teams now because it's the World Cup. On a normal day, is Messi, Ronaldo. Even the players, the African players who are this World Cup, they know that they don't even enjoy home support. On a normal day, take away the World Cup, they don't. These guys don't know them or where they play. Nope. They don't dedicate the same energy to local football. They don't. Everything is the model America, model Europe. Donald Trump is their personal Lord and personal savior. Every time they always look at these European nations and they look at these North American nations, they look at them as saner climes and write themselves off completely. So why wouldn't you have that mentality? He now understands it because it's football. This is what we've been saying since. And this is why it's important to decolonize. The colonial mentality. That is what he's trying to describe here. If we don't do that, because he's spot on about these African teams going and capitulating simply because they lack the confidence. But how do you can't be confident when you don't even believe in any of the things that are everything about you is boroboro. You want to be like these people. So why would you travel at their feet whenever you meet them in a field of play, in a game or anything? I'm asking a question. Why wouldn't you? This is why we need to take this. You see this colonization process. We need to take it seriously. Our minds to decolonize our minds, because that's what when people ask, hey, where do we begin? This is where we begin. our minds, because we're not going anywhere.
So, Trigger Happy, he said I completely forgot to add a link or something, but I just copied the attachments to the prompt straight down. So there's 3 attachments, and I'm playing them in order. So I don't know what order they were supposed to be in. There goes the fireworks. This takes us to the second prompt from David Hundian. It says, maybe, just maybe, at the highest levels of competition, where even the tiniest differences in mentality can result in vast competitive differences, maybe having a national team made up of people who instinctively think of themselves as people from that nation would provide a slight competitive advantage over talented Congolese, Ivorian, and Senegalese teams, where half of the players think they're from France and another third think they're from Belgium. Maybe the fact that Harry Kane has no such identity crisis or colonial complex inside his head gives him that extra 0.1% of mental clarity to deliver when his country needs him. Maybe the fact that Yon Wiesa, on the other hand, has a head full of all this mental clutter, contributes just a tiny little bit to dulling his output right when it needs to be sharpest. Maybe football is a reflection of society, and a national football team reflects the character of the nation it represents. Maybe it is not possible for a society that genuinely takes no pride in itself to have a football team that takes pride in itself. Maybe it's no coincidence that in the entire history of the World Cup, competition has only been won by teams whose coach is indigenous. Maybe the World Cup is not about how individually great your Bayern Munich and Liverpool superstars are. Maybe it's about finding out whether those Villarreal and Olympique Lion stars can emotionally connect with the aspirations of the national team shirt they're wearing. Maybe neo-colonial stalemate societies with zero state ambition and no shared sense of national project are never going to be anything other than colorful. Never be anything other than colorful also runs at the FIFA World Cup. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, and I'm just a dickhead who overthinks everything. Maybe I shouldn't even bother posting this because what fucking needle doesn't move anywhere. Now, this is a caption to a retweet from the same David Hundian. He says, Newcastle United interviewer asks a question, where do you come from? Yon Visa, full DRC international and AFCON goal scorer, says, I'm from France. An identity crisis is a heck of a thing to have. And this is the goalie who said, I'm from France. Third, let me share the third attachment, also on X. This is from Aristide Penda Kehu. It says the famous inferiority complex in video form. Antonio Nusa was born in 2005. He has never participated in the World Cup before the one in 2026. Erling Haaland is also taking part for the first time. Norway has not qualified for the World Cup since 1998. It has a total of 4 participations, just like Cote d'Ivoire. Argument about a lack of experience compared to those they're up against is a big lie tied to this complex. So this is a short video. Let me see if there's more to it. We'll watch it and then we'll discuss it all. Sorry, it's in a different language and my audio just disconnected. But I think we get the point. I think we get the point. And I think this ties in a little bit to the previous conversation I was trying to get to the question of. But Black Steel, certain African teams had the better talent and better footballing display. Is it an issue of mentality, or is that the wrong answer? Again, let me go back to David here. David is saying that, the identity crisis. David and others are saying the identity crisis. When the first video we saw, the guy mentions your politics is white, your laws are white, your savior is white, your religion is white. Then, of course, when you get on the battlefield, if you will, you have this inferiority complex versus Harry Kane, who, for the UK, who doesn't have that identity crisis. And so when it comes, when the going gets heavy, they get to rise to the occasion because they don't have to fight against or fight through this identity crisis. What say you to all of that, Blackstone?
Oh man, that's kind of heavy, man. I thought we were just looking at some. Okay, so let me see if I can I can wrap my head around this. These people from the Congo, they say they're French, probably because they speak French. They probably are Catholic. They probably have a European worldview because they basically have grown up in Europe. Let's keep it a buck, mentally at least. Are they saying that they're losing the game on purpose, or are they saying that the gist is that, okay, these superior African teams who have better players, better histories, and then they go up against the Europeans and like, oh, they just lose their nerve. They just kind of give up because they don't feel they're worthy to be playing football among white people. I mean, if that was the case, then there would be no African nations winning gold medals in the Olympics, right? Many times these African nations go up against Europeans in the track and field and they obliterate them. So if it is, it's an individual problem. I don't feel like it's a collective issue. I think that might just be that individual person who feels that way because they go up against them in the Olympics and they win all the time. So that's just my thoughts on that. I mean, maybe it's that particular person, some issues he got to deal with. I don't know. Maybe I'm just too woke for this, as the kids say. I don't know. I think this is a complex issue, but it could just boil down to maybe they just got cold feet. That could be an issue. But like I said, they do it in the Olympics all the time. It's not an issue. They come back with the 100-meter dash. Look at our brother Usain Bolt. Look at these black people who do well in track and field and shot put and everything else, and they don't seem to have a problem going up against these crackers. So I don't know. That's a failure on his part to be able to conceptualize himself winning. I don't think it's a collective thing.
To be fair, when you mention like Usain Bolt, for example, most times, Sha'Carri Richards, most times they're running against black folks, Caribbean, American, what have you. It's a little different. When you consider football, and by the way, this conversation, this identity crisis or this inferiority complex, we don't have to keep it at football because not everyone is big on football, right? Sometimes just in life, I think there's some black folks who just acquiesce to whiteness. By the way, shout out to Lord of Slaughter and shout out to Anthony McPhail. Thanks for coming through. I think there is moments where black folks, because as you would say, Black Steel, there's a lot of low racial self-esteem. I think that sometimes we don't summons it up the way we would, if it was us competing against another black person. So I think that's really what it was. So I kind of appreciate what David is saying there. It is something that needs to be looked into. Don't do you at least think there's a possibility that there is a low racial self-esteem in this case, in this example, with football, considering that these teams were up, like Trigger mentioned, Senegal was leading 2-0, 2-0, and lost the game to Belgium. Ivory Coast was up as well, lost the game to Norway. Do you think that a low racial self-esteem can make it where you, even though you're better, you can't get over that mental hump, Blackstone?
I mean, you said they were up 2-0. Was they what mistakes were they making? Why were they missing goals they should have made? Like, what happened as far as the game?
Defense.
Defense. Well, it seems like it's a recurring problem. They got to work on their defense. It doesn't sound like, oh, we just let's not let's give in because these white boys are here. They're gonna beat it. It sounds like they just need to work on a very crucial aspect of their game. I don't know. Maybe I'm just not looking too deep into it. They could. I mean, you say they're better than them, but at the same time, are they really better than them? Because their defense sucks and they're not better. If they're letting the other team score goals and they should have defeated them, then I don't know. Maybe David's looking into it too deep. Maybe they just suck. They just need to get better at defense. They got to work on that. I don't, if they've done this, if they've gone this far, I'm assuming they made it to the World Cup. They were able to defeat other European teams, right? They weren't just playing African teams to get that far. I'm assuming they had to go up against other European countries, So it just sounds like maybe they might have been better than them on paper, but when push came to shove, if they couldn't defend, then that's the problem.
In the chat, Trigger says, once they go into a defensive shell, they allow for the opposition to take the time to break them down and slowly break apart what they worked for instead of killing their opponent off. Culture Education said that's a good point, Black Steel. Trigger says that isn't a good argument when African nations don't have a lot of Olympic records. You're speaking about African nations that built the confidence by way of their interest in the sport. That was towards Black Steel. He says, like, using Olympics generally is not a good argument. And these are a lot of individual athletes. We are speaking to a collective team and hence a collective problem. He goes on to say the Caribbean has the confidence of track and field because they actually built on that particular sport and will have a psychological edge. Also, many will make the argument that the quality of these squads are not good because of sport infrastructure. However, these Senegalese and Ivorian teams are superior to these teams. He said it's not just defense. Okay. They go into a defensive low block shell because they think they can't attack or score again. These African teams completely dominated their opponent for more context. He says World Cup qualifiers are restricted to your continent. Okay, so I think one of the issues here is we're speaking about it in the form of football or soccer, as they say out here. Let's look at it as just in terms of organizing and striving for power. Sorry about that alarm. Right? Let's just look at it as far as getting organized, being organized, striving for power, striving to be, striving to be our best self, especially on the continent. Is it possible that we have an inferiority complex based on all that has happened historically, and that a big reason why we haven't gone over the hump, seized power, etc., is because when we see this white man, and for the reasons that other guy in the video presented, politics is white, much of your culture is imported white, your savior is white. Could that be an inferior? Could that create an inferiority complex that keeps us back. Like, see, I know I keep asking you this same kind of question, but remove the football part. What do you think about that argument?
All right. So yeah, I definitely understand that the way history is taught, right? Many African people don't see themselves as succeeding. I think it was a post that you had on X one time, Koku, where somebody was talking about how the white man was superior, like just straight up. Oh yeah, they're better than us because they came and colonized us. You know, this is the way it's framed, as if the European is somehow better or superior. Yeah, I guess I could definitely say it's a mental slavery. You know, you've already been defeated mentally. You've already been defeated in your mind. Then what challenge do you have? And I think that's why it's important to understand our history, our successes, and our defeats as well, because that could easily be something that can be passed along. You know, when you feel that you're already defeated before you even begun, why try? And I think that's something that does plague oppressed people. We've already been defeated. Why should we bother? We look at this overwhelming firepower and their weapons, and they have all this and they have all that. We can't fight back. And I think that really it gets to a point of desperation where many people believe that it's better to fight and die than live in these conditions. I think that many people have reached that point. For those who have not, they'd be willing to acquiesce, leadership or governance to another people if they don't have that confidence in themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important. You know, uh, we are in the U.S., so maybe maybe it would go over better if we were discussing American football. But that's the thing about sports. Sports is that microcosm. It is that it is. I was watching Kaba Kamini. He was talking about how black folks created the Olympics and these sports came out of warfare and stuff like that. It is a warfare thing. It is about being organized, and you have to have a self-respect. You have to have a high racial self-esteem. You have to have a high personal self-esteem to really be a competitor. You know, and if we are as a people, if we're being dominated or not pushing back enough, not having really overturned the things that have happened to us and worked on ourselves, etc., it stands to reason. And I think that's what the prompt is kind of getting at as well. It stands to reason that even in sports we'll get dominated if we don't get the idea of the white man is better, the white nation is better. You know, my voice is. I'm starting to lose my voice a little bit, but it's an interesting thing. Earlier in the chat, I saw. I don't know if I read it, but I thought it was a good comment. I might not be able to find it now. Trigger Happy made a good point earlier that we really need. Yes, it's right here. He said the solution to this is African teams need psychologists because this problem is a microcosm of at times not thinking of ourselves highly. I will extend that out away from football, and I would say we as a people need to deal with our mental health. We need mental health experts as part of our organizing. We really do. Because a lot of us, even amongst conscious people, like last week or week before, I think it was the last time I hosted, we looked at a prompt with Omar saying to Donald Trump, thank you. Thank you, Donald Trump. Like, yo. Right? But we need to really work on our mental. And I think that does play a role in how we represent ourselves, even on the football field. Let me just read two more comments here. Trigger Happy says sports is like the best way to symbolize warfare. Before you watch the World Cup, you already will get a lesson on geopolitics before you start. He says, for example, many white teams have what I call black mercenaries. Absolutely. They know black people will dominate in any sport they enter, so they just employ them instead. He goes on to say the World Cup is even more interesting because for a long time, there were only 1 to 2 African sports. Now that there are 10 sports, these European teams are loaded with African players. He says, keep in mind, too, this prompt is warranted because sport teams employ neurologists and psychologists all the time. Africans need it, but in a very specific race-conscious manner to win in sports. I would go a step further and say we need it to win in life. We need it to win in life. That's something we got to really, really zero in on. We need that. We got to get our mentals together. Black Seal, I doubt it, but do you have any last thoughts on this prompt?
No, we can move on to the next one.
All right. The next prompt is Shoot the Breeze topic number 3.